Welcome back, and let's start to look at selecting the indicators, or in your case what you're going to do is to analyze the case study and see what they have done in terms of the different indicators that they've selected. So please look at or listen to the next video, and then in the video we're going to look at all the different types of indicators and the criteria that you need to look at, and that will then help you to analyze the case study and to either agree or disagree with indicators as chosen by the panel. Okay, so how many indicators do we need for a specific intervention? If we've got too many indicators, then it might lead us to make many mistakes. So at least 1 or 2 indicators per result from hopefully different sources, so that we don't only look at one specific thing and make a huge decision based on one set of information. So 1 indicator or 2 indicators for every core activity. Please don't use more than 8 to 10 indicators, because that will actually have too much of an impact on the focus, and it will make us measure many different things, and we might actually be missing crucial information. Use a mix of data collection, so don't only have numerical indicators. For instance, if we only chase numbers, then we might miss crucial quality information that we need, or different information. So be careful specifically of numerical indicators only. So do a combination. If you do a numerical indicator, then you have to put a quality or a process or another indicator to join it. Okay, so indicators to measure, we have process indicators, we have results indicators. So the process indicators looks at the process that has to be followed and how we're going to do things. We might then have results indicators where we measure the impact, we measure the output, or we measure the outcome of what it is that we were trying to do. Just to remind you again, you've seen this pyramid before. So this is also linked to what we're going to measure. So if we measure the input, then obviously we're going to see how much money we spend, how many people we've got, how many hours we spend there. But input indicators does not show us impact. If all our inputs are correct, but we do not achieve the output or the impact of what we want to do, then it might be that it's a process or a decision earlier on that might have an impact on the success. So make sure that when you look at your indicators, that we have indicators on each one of these levels. Okay, so let's look at the type of indicators. The first one that we're going to look at is an indicator of availability. So this shows whether something exists and if it's available to whoever is going to use it. For example, we might measure the availability of hospitals in an area and how accessible it is to specific patients. The availability of schools would be another indicator of availability. Indicator of relevance, these show how relevant or appropriate something is. So whether new stoves burn less fuel than the old ones. So if you want to reduce the fuel, then you would have an indicator of relevance. Indicators of accessibility shows whether there's something might exist, as in the first one, it is available, but it might not be used or accessible to those who need it. So a health post in one village may be out of reach for other villages due to mountains or rivers or whatever the case may be. Indicators of utilization then also would be linked to those. So something might be available, but it might not be used. So if there's a school available, but students don't go to that school, then the availability indicator shows that they are there, but the utilization shows that that is not up to standard, which will then lead us to try and figure out why people don't utilize that, and it then leads us to different questions to ask. More indicators. Indicators of coverage. These show what proportion of those who need something are receiving it. So the coverage, the percentage of people, for instance, that need certain medication that is actually on that medication. Indicators of quality, very important. These show the quality or the standard of something. So whether the water is free might be fantastic, but what is the quality of that water, and does that ring true? So if we say in South Africa we talk about free tertiary education, which would indicate availability and accessibility of something, but then we need to measure the quality to say whether this free education will give us the quality and what would be the criteria of that quality that we would want to measure. Sometimes there's an indicator of effort, so this shows how much of what is being invested achieves the objective. So we might work very hard on something as an indicator. We measure the effort that is put in, but then we need to link that with an indicator of quality or an indicator of efficiency or impact to show whether that effort actually creates the outcome that we wanted to. An indicator of efficiency then does exactly that. These show whether resources and activities that are being put into the best possible objectives, are they achieving what we wanted to achieve. And then the impact is what has changed after we've done all of these things, and have we seen a reduction in poverty, if that was the impact that we were going for? Have we seen an increase in health or an increase in life expectancy? So those would be typical indicators of impact that we will only be able to measure after a number of years, and it might also have many different interventions that would give rise to the same impact indicator. Okay, so the main criteria for assessing indicators: an indicator has to be valid. So we cannot measure one thing using something that is not valid. For instance, you measure the health of a patient by looking at how happy their children are, or something stupid like that. Technical feasibility, so is it something that we are able and capable to measure? Is it a reliable source of information? Is it usable information? And are people willing to participate? And how do we carry out that specific measure in our stakeholder group? So other criteria includes it must be comprehensible. So the indicator should be worded in such a way that everyone understands exactly what it is that we are trying to measure. It must be valid. So it must show us actual measures. It must be sensitive to change. So if your indicator does not change over time, or when something changes, then they're not sensitive enough. So if we look again at the patient that we had in previous videos and we measure their temperature, that temperature measure is quite sensitive and can even show us a half a point up or down. So that shows us quite a sensitive indicator. The indicator must be cost effective, so it doesn't help us if we've got indicators, but they are so costly to measure that it becomes not sensible to do that. Okay, so they must be done timely. So we need to be able to get it quickly and get the decision to in time to make the measure so that we can actually use it when we need it. And then the last one that is very important is we need to look at the ethical collection of information. So for instance, if we have something and we measure the criteria or the indicator, but the way that we apply it is unethical. So for instance, we give medication to a certain group of the population and that we leave the others to suffer, then the question always arises, is this something ethical to do, especially if it has a huge impact on people? So just keep the ethical in mind, and we will later on investigate that aspect a little bit further. So the central function of any performance measure process is to provide regular, valid data on indicators so that it enables us to make the good decisions in terms of what we were doing. So let's apply this. In activity 2, you will be given a case study. So you can look at the video again and make sure that all of those criteria that we've discussed here applies to the case study. So please indicate the different types that you identify and make sure that you understand all all of these things in terms of the application in the case study.